Okay. Hello and welcome to this actually very first episode of Aliveness by Design. My name is Rockit, and I welcome you to this space where me and my guest will discuss aliveness, first of all, and then our, let's say, role or our archetype or our purpose within that archetype, or how we express our own aliveness through this archetype. We will use our own life and our own life experience as the way to look at the journey from our shadows into our gifts, as well as a little bit to theme it a little bit more, to wrap it a little bit more in the context of human design system, which is very well put together fusion of different systems like astrology, Vedic chakra systems, Kabbalah, as well as just understanding of energy, let's say, in that way. So with this being said, I am so very excited to bring on my first Sagittarius guest during the season of Sagittarius, Ioana Kelani. And Ioana Kelani, hello, darling.
Hello, Yuri.
It's so good to be with you.
I'm so honored to be your first guest on your show. It's so exciting.
I mean, it's a sort of like a different show, but we've done some of the shows before together, but it's just a different show. So it's nothing really different that way, but it's also in some way our follow-up from our reading that we did together. Because none of you, if you're listening to any of you, you don't have to know anything about human design. This is mainly about aliveness and Ioana and gifts and how we express our gifts of aliveness. But just in terms of the terms of human design, Ioana and I, we have a similar energy profile, a similar energy type. It's called manifesting generator. And even before I knew a lot about human design, Ioana and I, we had this understanding that we are very similar in a lot of ways. We're very connected in that way. And so if any of you understand what manifesting generator is just a person with a lot of life force. It's a life force that just comes out of you. It's really hard to tame it or put it in a specific frame or just center yourself in one specific project. It's just life force that wants to go all over the places. You want to do all of the things. And that's what Ioana is. She's a beautiful, beautiful representation of this potent energy, as well as not only just potent energy, but also this energy taken in a very directed, focused way. Because Ioana, apart from being amazing human being, a mom, as well as a business owner of Kelani, which is Polynesian meditation and movement system, and I can't wait to hear a little bit more about this. Ioana as well, an author of, remind me how many books? Three books, and there is a next book, as I kind of understand, is in the process. A published book, not just books that are just in ether, like myself. So with this all being said, Ioana, remind me this one other thing that you're doing right now in terms of studies. Like if your life was not full enough with everything that you are and everything that you have, you are actually right now doing a degree in
psychology.
So you see how deep things really go here with psychology. And I really love having discussions with Ioana, because sometimes we just have random discussions on a phone, and we talk about different things. And it's really wonderful to see how this manifesting generator gift of being so multifaceted comes together in what you teach and who you are. Because at least from my perspective, what I see how you beautifully represent your ethnic background and who you are through your genetics, through this beautiful way of describing it scientifically. And that's, I guess, what Kelani, your brand, stands for. So speaking of all of this, I would like to bring the conversation closer to what aliveness means to you. What does aliveness stands for in your life?
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for having me here. I think I've already thanked you, but I'll thank you again. I don't think we can thank people enough. But, I was thinking about our talk, and I was thinking about how, number one, words can really fall short sometimes of expressions, because sometimes there's just a certain knowing that we have. We just know. And as much as we try to intellectualize it, as much as we try to read books about it, as much as we try to do all of those things, it's just a kind of knowing that we have. So for me, aliveness is being. And I love metaphors. You know this. My brain works in metaphors and in analogies. And so I had one that came to mind. The other day, I went to a studio, and it's a studio that I'm going to be running a workshop from tomorrow. And the studio owner, who's wonderful, led me into a room. We turned off all the lights in the room. And so the room was completely dark. And she's like, this is the remote control. And she showed me the remote control, and there was an on button, and it had all of these little lights on it. And so you press one light and it's like green, and another light and it's blue, and another light, whatever, all the different lights. And it made me think about aliveness or mana or life force, and just kind of like that room is in this building that is tapped into this power source, which is electricity, for example, right? And it's there all the time, but it's just a matter of activating it. It's just a matter of turning on those little buttons, right? And so I think what's interesting to me, and I was thinking a lot about this, is, so for example, mana, which is a Polynesian word for life force, power, and it's something that you don't actually make it out of nowhere. You don't just like put 5 ingredients together and all of a sudden you've got mana. You're tapping into something. You're tapping into life force. You're tapping into everything that's around you. You're tapping into the power of the earth, the power of the skies, the power of everything around you. And it's just a matter of being awake to it. And to me, that's a lot of what aliveness is. That's a lot of what alofa is. That's a lot of what mana is. It's just kind of this awareness, and then acting on it. So it's just like being in that room, right? Like we're all tapped into it, but we all have access to it. We all have access to it, but it's just a matter of, like, what are you going to do to it? How are you going to activate this power? And I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I always think about the Marvel, the Marvel comics and the Marvel movies. And we think about all of these people who are just regular people walking around, and all of a sudden they're like either superheroes or they're villains, right? And basically what they've done is just harness power that everybody has access to. And I think, to me, that's what makes these movies maybe so popular, is that it's just kind of like Spider-Man is just like this underdog, nerdy little kid, and all of a sudden he's Spider-Man. But everybody can be Spider-Man. I don't know why I chose Spider-Man out of all of them. I'm not saying he's my favorite, but to me, that's what it is. That's what mana is. That's what aliveness is. It's just tapping into this thing that's around all of us, and then going one step further and going, well, what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that mana? So for me, the way that I express my mana is through alofa. And so alofa is love in my Samoan language. And it's not like, not that there's anything wrong with Hollywood love, but it's not Hollywood love. It's unconditional love. It's kind of like this, I'm just going to love you, Yuri, and I have no expectations of our friendship. I'm gonna love nature, and I'm gonna recycle, because I actually think that it's a good idea to not leave our planet in a worse shape than it was when I arrived on it, not because that's the law. I'm going to go to my neighbor, and when he's sick, I'm gonna give him some food, not because I want him to think that I'm a cool person, but because I actually think that this is the way that I'm contributing. So I think that when we have this aliveness, this mana, it lights us up, right? You have all of these different things and you light up. And then when you light up, then people are like, oh, we joked about this one time. You can have mana too. You can have aliveness too. You can have access to this. We're all about like the infomercials. You can do this as well. And we can all do it. It's not like only certain people can have it. It's not like a club or like only exclusive people can do it. So, but having said that, again, words fall short of this, it's essence, it's being. And then it's just living kind of awake. Because we can live in so many different ways, but just like being awake to it and going, oh, wow, like I have all this access to all this cool stuff. What can I do with it?
Yeah.
So that's basically it in a small.
This is, and again, translating it into even human design system, that is literally you talking about this flow of mana, or flow of life force energy. That's, I guess, the term that a lot of people can know a little bit more because it's in yogic tradition, and in Qigong Tai Chi, we understand this life force energy type of term, but that's just a free flow, right? You can't control it. I love what you said in terms of knowing. It is knowing. Yeah. You simply know that this energy is expressing through you. And I think part of our duty, right, is to allow that flow and allow it in a way that, as you said, that is more constructive to not only ourselves, but also to others, to the planet. And like you said, it's really hard to define it by our mind, because our mind wants to define it so well, be like, this is why I'm doing things like this, right? A lot of times we don't know why we do things like this. And when you said this, I kind of came to remembering this cool term that I sort of come up with, how mindfulness is a big trend. And I thought, like, why don't we talk about heartfulness, especially in the West, because everything is about mind. Like, we're trying to understand mind. We try to sit down and calm our mind down and try to figure out what mind does. And instead of trying to be so obsessed with our mind, like, can't we just sit with our heart and spend a little bit more time just cultivating that heartfulness and be like, what feels good for my heart? Like, what type of aliveness is good for me today? How will it nourish my heart? And that space will translate into the space of greater good for all. Yes. And we absolutely enjoyed that activation analogy, because I think another thing that I love so much is this, how you make abstract thought more like logical and more visual. And I like that activation of aliveness or of mana. And again, right, it could be activated for either good or not so good, right? It could be used for either way. It's just a tool. And then we, being conscious, that's why so many of the mindfulness or heartfulness practices are so important, because they help us understand in some way, how are we using this sacred responsibility that we have? And literally sacred, meaning it comes from our sacral energy, right? It comes from our core, which is another thing what I was just like thinking through my mind. Another thing that happens to generators, or that you and I are manifesting generators, when we're listening to something that is so aligned with us, that is so speaking to us deeply, you cannot help but just do things like this, or actually express your agreement with sounds like, like you're really digging this message. That message really speaks to me. So this, in my world, one of these things, when I listen to somebody speaking, or when I listen to somebody teaching, right, or expressing, reflecting some very deep thoughts, when I have that response from my sacral, it's not just my mind that is responding, it's actually a response that comes from the depth of my body. And that's where I'm like, this is true. I don't know if it's true to this person or to that person, but it's true to me. What is being said, what I'm hearing, it is responding through my body, because that life force that is running through me is responding to that. So speaking of the activations and different practices, or let's say different rituals, even in some way, because I think the word practice is more something that comes from our mind. And I think rituals are really helping us to connect to that life force. So what are your practices? How do you connect to mana? How do you connect to aliveness in your daily life?
Yeah. Dance. I'm not going to say first and foremost, but a lot of it is dance. And I'm just going to sidetrack there for a second. I don't, when I was younger, I didn't consider myself proficient at movement or at dancing. I was kind of awkward. I still am. So it's really odd for me now. If my little girl self heard me now, she'd be like, what do you mean dance? but it's not dance in this kind of like choreograph. Not that there's anything wrong with choreography, but in 2007, I was at the park, I believe, with my mom, and she started to show me some Polynesian movements, some Polynesian dance-based movements, and there was just something totally different about that. You know, I'm pretty sure I was barefoot. I usually am, and I was moving my hips. So Polynesian movements are very much, there's a big emphasis on the hip area. And it was just, Yuri, a different kind of, again, a knowing. I was like, what is this? There's something different about this. And I didn't know back then. I had no idea. And you know, when I, with university and with psychology, it's just a way of kind of like putting into words an inner knowing, right? So I always say it's like combining ancestral wisdom with academic wisdom, just kind of like we said, that's the way language is how we communicate. So this is the way I'm communicating with anyone watching right now through these words that I already know. So I connected with that and I was like, this is it. Like there's not it, but it's just something that's so beautiful. And I didn't understand it back then. So anyway, I created the movement, Kelani. I combined the Polynesian movements and all the other stuff and connection to nature. So movement is a huge, huge, huge part of how I, you know, harness the mana. And it's interesting because, you know, when I'm alone in my room and I'll put on some Polynesian music and I just move, it's kind of like you get into this, I can't think of another word, but trance. You get into this like trance state where, again, words don't do it justice. You just have this amazing flow, this energy. You don't have to think about it. And, you know, flow state is one of my favorite things. So I think mana and flow state are very much related as well, because you're really present. You're not in the past or the future. You're just in this moment. So there's a sense of harnessing that happens when you're in flow state. So certainly movement in the form of dance, especially the hips, is a big one for me. I know intellectually now that the hips hold a lot of energy, emotion, so does the rest of the body. But with the root and sacral chakras, as you know, probably more than me, that's where a lot of energy kind of lives. Sometimes it can get stuck. And so a lot of people that have come to my classes experience a lot of emotions, and it could be, you know, ecstatic emotions, it could be like really low emotions, but something is happening, something is stirring. So I think it's important to move that energy. Just like water that's still, it can get like moldy and stuff, but if you move it, it just creates that beautiful flow like the ocean. So movement is one of them. Connecting to nature whenever I can. And I will admit to everyone out there that I more of the summer nature than the winter nature, and I just blame my genetics. I don't think it's my fault.
That's fine. That's fine. I blame my genetics as well for that. I totally.
Yeah. So being in nature is 100% one of my favorite ways. And for me specifically, it's water. Even more specifically, it's the ocean. So the energy of the ocean is just special that way. And then meditating. So I've always, you know this as well, probably more than most people, is that I've had kind of like a meditative practice for I don't know how long. I really don't, a really, really long time. But as of recent, I've just been getting a little bit deeper into the kind of practice where I'm just completely quiet. And that's not a common thing for me, to be quiet. And I think in that silence is where the aliveness comes up, which sounds kind of paradoxical, but that's where you see everything. And that could mean awesome emotions. It could mean anxiety. It could mean sadness. It could mean excitement. It could be all of those things. And I think that oftentimes, and this is just my belief, maybe a lot of times people purposely don't tap into their aliveness because they don't want to feel all of those feels. They just want to choose, just like you go to a grocery store, I'm just going to choose like the ones that I like. Yeah. But it's not energy is not it's not a grocery store. You don't get to choose.
Oh, really? Oh man.
Sorry.
I thought I'd get my best deal on Black Friday. Isn't it a thing today, apparently? At least here in the United States.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, as much as we would like to, I don't think that we get to choose a lot of things. Obviously, we can harness like I said, the mana, but all of those, those things that come up from either childhood or conditioning. We've talked about conditioning, or from past traumas, or from, ancestry, or whatever it is. Those things come up as well, and that's part of our aliveness as well. And I think, or mana, and it doesn't all feel awesome, but in that space of quiet, you get to see it all and express alofa to all of it, and just be like, oh, I love it all. It doesn't feel good, but that's okay, because it's all there for a reason. It all happened for a reason. And, trying not to push it away. So that's another way. And then community. And so you are part of my community, and definitely connecting, harnessing that community, power. I'm going to use the word power, because it is powerful. It is powerful when you're able to have that. We talked about disclosure a lot. When you have these people in your life that you've heard all of it from me. You've heard, as they say, the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't think there's anything bad or ugly, but you know what I'm trying to say. And I think that's really important as well, to have that space. So all of those are pretty much part of my regular practice. Like I said, maybe with exception to nature, not as much these days, and a rainy day like today, but yeah, those are the main ones.
I love what you said as, dance being an activation, at least how I heard it, activation of that aliveness, right? Because and we have to define it, like you said, in terms, right? And for us, it is dance. Listen, like for me, my Qigong practice of just moving my hands up and down around my body is a dance in some way, right? It's my expression or my connection to this energy field that is around me. And I do consider myself a dancer as well, right? I'm not as, Broadway dancer, but I'm a dancer in the way that I respond to the rhythm. My body, my aliveness responds to the tapping of my foot, right? As little as it is your expression of aliveness. And what's important, you mentioned this thing of that not everyone is willing for some reason, or it's actually resisting your aliveness of not moving your body. And, going for a jog could be just as great expression of aliveness as a dance, right? There's a different element to it. There's more element of flow in a dance, and it kind of represents some kind of different energy type that you would do. But running is just great to just move your blood around, right? Your blood starts to circulate, and that physicality, I think, wakes us up to remembering, oh, I'm not just all up here. I'm not just thoughts and my ruminations. I'm actually the body and sensations of the body. And with that comes feelings, and then emotions, and then thoughts.
Yes.
And of course, doing all of that in the nature is even better, right? Because that's what our ancestors did. They didn't really go for runs. Maybe they did, actually, I don't know. But they definitely gathered together in community around an element, which is probably a lot of times a river or a fire, and they would dance, right? They would have some type of movement that would look like a dance. And a lot of times they don't look like they do look like a dance. Listen, I'm gonna go there. And community is so powerfully important to so many of us. That connection, safe connection, right? Like it's a safe, trusting space where you can talk about things like this without thinking who's gonna see you in whatever way, or how you're gonna be considered, like, right? So love this. How do you, in your personal way, in the way how you came up to this remembering of your essence, let's say, right? Or like this knowing, like, was this knowing always with you, or one day it just suddenly like dawned on you and you're like, oh, I need to be this more, I need to talk about this more? Would you be comfortable sharing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm comfortable sharing, probably too much sometimes.
Love it.
If there's such a thing. So I think that's a great question. All your questions are great, obviously, but I think that we all have a knowing. I think it's a matter of letting it, or allowing it. So I've always had a knowing that I'm really deeply connected to my ancestry. I've always had a knowing that there's more that I want to do. I've always had a knowing that, that I can connect in certain ways. But what I've noticed in the past 15 or so years since the inception of Kelani, is that I fought against a lot of things and I tried to do things a different way. So that has been, I suppose, if we're, you didn't ask me, but I'm going to talk about the shadow of the manifesting generator is fighting against this kind of like discomfort. You're like, there's something wrong with this, but I'm just going to do it anyway because everybody says that's the way to do it, and everybody around me is doing it, and everyone on social media is doing it, and all the people around me are saying to do it, so maybe that's what I should do, even though it doesn't feel right, even though everything in my body is reacting weirdly to it, even though all of those kinds of things, but I'm just going to do it because and then you get all like the dopamine hits, and I think that can be a little bit confusing sometimes as well, because you and I know about, and many people watching probably, about the brain chemicals, and what feels good isn't necessarily good for you. So you get the dopamine hit of the likes on Facebook, or you get the dopamine hit of the accolades, or you get the dopamine hit of all of those things. And so you think maybe in one part of you, maybe I am going in the right direction. Maybe this is okay. But there's still a part of you at the end of the day when you put your head on the pillow that's like, oh, something's off. I don't know how to explain it, but it's off. So for me personally, and I'll give you an example of this, and this is kind of like a sneak peek into my fourth book, but a big part of it is I've always felt, I have this knowing that I'm connected, but then my intellect is telling me, no, you don't have a right to represent Samoa. You don't have a right to talk about Alofa. You weren't born there. You didn't live your whole life there. You barely speak the language. What right do you have? You know what? Make it more interesting. Maybe wear more of the things. Maybe try to learn choreography. That might be maybe that'll make you more authentic. To be clear, you can't be made more authentic. Authenticity is just you are. You don't become more authentic. You connect to your authenticity. It's just like power. You harness it. You don't become you. You are you. That's you. You're born with it. You die with it. That's your essence. You're not creating it. But you can cover it up. You can cover it up. I was going to put the clipboard on me, but you can cover it up with all of these masks and all of these things, and that's okay, because the brain that we're born with tells us, if society doesn't like you, you'll die, because that's what happened in our ancestors. In the tribal way, when you were excluded, when you were shunned, you'd be out in the middle of nowhere and you'd die. So that's the brain, and that's okay. And that's what I love about psychology, because it kind of explains a lot of like, oh, that's why I feel uncomfortable. But discomfort doesn't mean that it's wrong. That kind of discomfort. When you feel that something is off, when your energy is off, I could tell. It's very interesting to me. I can look at pictures of myself, say 7 years ago, when I was doing something that was off. And I can see in myself, probably other people can't, just the way that I am, my demeanor. And it's not right and it's not wrong, but it just wasn't aligned. It wasn't a true activation. It was kind of like this, sort of like the lights that are around me right now, like fake artificial light versus like the light of the sun. I suppose that's one way of describing it, right? When you're kind of like, you go into a grocery store and then there's the fluorescent lights, but then you go into the sun. They both kind of give you that light, but one is energetic, one is healing, one is an exchange, and the other one is just, it's fluorescent. Yeah. So yeah.
It's an analogy, especially in the grocery store, it's like picking up a vegetable in a vegetable aisle with a fluorescent light in a cold over the freezers. And even though it says organic, right, you'd be like, oh, okay, it's still just vegetable. But then you're picking it fresh under the sun in some garden in Italy, and you taste it. And that is not just organic, that is literally alive,
Yes.
That's where the true nature and quality of aliveness, I guess, as well.
Yeah. So I could go on and on, but I don't want to. I know our time. I don't want to spend most of the time talking about
refining the quality of aliveness. I think I just kind of I have to put some notes down sometimes because they're just so good. The quality of aliveness. And this is what I love, what you mentioned. What feels good is not always good for you. Yeah, right. It's like almost like that quality of aliveness. For a second, there's some conditioning, like you mentioned, right? might feel correct for us for that one split second. But then on the long term, when you're sitting down in your meditation and you kind of tapping into your field of energy in your bioelectromagnetic field, and you're like, yeah, I think I've been drained. I think this activity or this specific energy field of this person or this project is not contributing to me, right? It's not giving me life force. It is not aligning with my force. It's not necessarily that it's robbing you force, but it's not aligned with you. And that's where, that disconnect is happening and you don't feel nourished by
Yes.
that, right? It's
Yes.
and this, and we definitely ultimately live in the world that is very much like this. We need to not just recognize with our mind, but really recognize with our aliveness in our bodies what is not necessarily good for us, right? Because reading one news or one type of news or for 2 seconds probably is good for you, but then obsessing over news and living in the new news lines, it's probably not going to be healthy, specifically in this stage of human evolution. I love how you touched on shadow, and there's definitely shadow to manifesting generator archetype, energy type, because like you said, it's a light or electricity that runs all over the places. It's like so easy to just get all over the places and be very, very intense in that way. But there's also gifts. There are also beauty about this type, and I like how you said that sometimes when we step away and we see, okay, this is how I can abuse this gift, but if I use that gift in the right way, I can actually create a lot of beautiful things there. So would you be open to talk a little bit more about your gifts? I know for me personally, it's hard to talk about my gift, but speak more a little bit about your gifts and how you are working with your gifts, right? Because I always feel like it's a process, right? It's you uncovering the gift, then practicing the gift, then sharing the gift with others. How does that process look like for you?
Exactly at the moment that you started saying that it was uncomfortable to talk about the gifts, I thought about something, and I thought about interconnectedness, and I thought about how we're all one, right? We're all separate, but all part of a one, just like the ocean and the drops in the ocean, each one. So I thought about maybe instead of, and this is just me thinking about another way maybe of saying gift is role, right? Or I think of a village in Samoa, for example. Every person in the village has their role, and that role contributes to the whole. So each of us has a role which manifests perhaps as, a gift, or however you want to call it. And that is their strength. That's the thing that, maybe there's a guy like when I lived in Samoa, I couldn't climb the tree behind my house. We called a neighbor's kid and they were able to climb the tree. And they pulled down the coconuts. I love coconuts. And I want a coconut right now.
That is a really cool archetype. Coconut getter. I want to have.
So for me, Yuri, I think that it's, I don't want to make it sound maybe kitschy or anything, but it's alofa, that's just that base thing of love and connecting with people and being, because part of the reason that I'm going into psychology is in getting the degree is so that I can actually formally do, trauma-informed therapy, individual, collective, and ancestral. And so that this love of talking to people, of connecting to people, of observing people, I think, to me, that's what I've been told anyway, is one of the ways that that's my role, is to be able to just bring people together. It's like the gate opener or the gatekeeper or whatever. I'm like, okay, this is Yuri and he's going to help you with human design. And this is, whoever else, and that person's going to do that. So I think connection, if I was going to boil it down, is connection and alofa are two of my, I guess, intrinsic or base gifts, and then how I use them. And I try to streamline, which I'm really working on these days, these years. With Kelani, we have 4 elements. So it's based on connection, but it's connection to the hips primarily, but the body in general. So through my hip movements, that's one of the things that I'm able to do very comfortably. The second one is connecting to nature, and my ability, as you've as you've seen, to be able to visualize, put it into words, explain, and then have the person go with their brain and go into that place without ever having to actually leave the house. The third thing is, the third element is community, bringing community together. I come from a collectivist, a background or ancestry, and a lot of what we do is community, and that comes very naturally to me. And then the fourth thing is connecting to higher self. And I know there's so many different ways of looking at higher self, but as we were preparing for this, I was thinking a few things, but as we're talking right now, it's kind of like connecting to aliveness, having that space through guided meditations, through breathing practices and stuff. So all of those ways of connecting to or harnessing alofa, spreading alofa, which is my hashtag. I believe that's my purpose. It feels right. And that's what I try to do in the world, spread the spirit and the culture of my ancestors.
This is so beautiful. I was like, I can listen to this forever. And as little as this whole entire stream scripted, I mean, I know that we had a conversation about human design, but it's not that. I don't think do you remember that actually 5-1 is the role? Like in your description of your human design, before it says manifesting generator, your role is 5-1. And it's really interesting that you mentioned your role. And I thought, hold on, like, did she actually did her research on, because I know we talked about it, but it's not something that people, really remember about their human design. They really connect to the energy type, but the role that's what we are. We all play specific role. We first come as an energy type, as a specific energy type, but then and we play role regardless. Like you said, you play your role regardless. You can play it very badly because you either repress that role, or you socially conditioned somehow not to be that role, and instead you want to be other role that would be 80% of current population of the world, right? Because we want to be very specific box personality and box type of life and box type of future and box type of account and box type of phone and all that type of situation. But then when you allow yourself to be that role, you can actually learn how to play that role really good, right? So then people that would come to visit you in this theater of life, they're watching your play and they like, wow, they play this really good. Speaking of Marvel movies, right? They represent their archetype, their role in such a high degree, in such a fine, refined way, right? With aliveness, I guess that would be another term there. And your role is 5-1, which stands for, in a very traditional design, it's called heretic investigator. So you are a very different visionary. You are a visionary that brings new ideas, new concepts, and you're not the same as the past. You kind of maybe take the past, but you re-envision it. That's why heresy comes, because they don't necessarily agree with whole of the tradition. They're like, I'm going to do it my way, I am out of this tradition, but I'm not necessarily in this tradition anymore. I'm in a different environment, but I keep bringing this beauty, those gifts of the tradition in modern day life. And then it's investigator. And it's funny you mentioned psychology, because investigation into depth, like finding out the depth of why you are the way you are, why the world the way you are. And that would make you an incredible teacher, because you have that very specific way to understand things in a more logical way as well. So that's so interesting. I thought, hold on, why is she talking about role? Like, that is incredible, because usually those numbers, they kind of come as something that people don't necessarily always relate or understand, because, if you're not refining your aliveness, it is hard to see how that role comes out in a correct way in your life, right? You still do that role, but if you're playing it badly, right, you just don't see that happening to you. So I really love how you said you are here to spread alofa, because actually others are looking at you as line 5. Others look at you and they see you doing that, and they like, okay, give us more of this, because they see you they see you being alive, they see you being alofa and mana in that way too. That is incredibly, incredibly beautiful. You know, I can go on for a long time talking about those things with you. To close this live stream, to close this conversation, what would be your advice to somebody who has this knowingness? Like you said, right? There's always knowingness within us. How would you say how to practice that knowingness, how to find that connection to aliveness or to your gift? And where do you take that from there?
Okay, well, one way is to, connect with practitioners like you who are able to.
That is very sweet. Or like you.
Okay, who are able to, map things out for you. So we talked about this, right? You're kind of like a human design GPS where if I were to go on the road on my own, I would kind of sort of know where I'm going and I would be guided. But you're like, yeah, you are actually going in the right direction. And I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe I'll just go a little with more intensity now because now I know I'm there. You illuminate the path, right? So that's one way. Honestly, Yuri, if there's anything that I've learned in the past 44 years, almost 45 soon, because I'm Sagittarius, in case anyone didn't hear at the beginning.
Hey, Sagittarius time. Solar return in a week or two.
Is just silence. I know it sounds so simple, but sometimes it is that simple. If there's anything, again, that I've learned is that I can, being manifesting generator, overcomplicate. I can read a lot, I can learn a lot, listen to 1,000 podcasts, talk to 1 million people, watch all of these things, and then make things like super complicated. And knowledge is one thing, but knowing is another. But if we're not conscious, if we're not awake and quiet and allow all of the things, I don't think that there's a way that you can. I if you're super distracted, which I've done all of those things, I'm not going to name all of them, but there's so many ways that we can get distracted because sometimes, like I said earlier, it doesn't feel great to feel all the things. But included in all the things and all the feels and all of everything is that, oh, this is my role. I can do that. This is something that I can do with my life. And then you focus on that. And it doesn't mean all the other stuff is going to go away and the pain or the trauma or all that kind of stuff. But then you're like, then you get to illuminate this thing and activate it more. So just quiet, like just being silent and allowing that to come up without distractions. And I know it's easier said than done, but it's absolutely possible. And then when you have that knowing, act on it. Because it's one thing to know, but act on it, nourish it. Like you and I were saying, it's one thing to have a seed and go, oh my goodness, I have this seed, and then do nothing with it. The seed's not going to go anywhere. Plant it, nourish it. And that could mean different things for different people. So actually, I want to ask you a question, Yuri, for anyone on my page that's watching this, in terms of, and I know that we're running out of time soon, but in terms of human design, I have a hard time explaining it to people because I did my human design with you, and of course I get it because I did it with you. But if somebody said to you, well, what exactly is it? How does it work? What's one way that you can explain to people that are watching, like what is?
Oh my gosh, there was such a beautiful closing to this whole thing of silence. I was like, oh, I couldn't even thought of a better answer than this, silence. And now here I am talking about human design. Which I love. Listen, you know me, I can talk about human design forever. The way to explain it would be, probably the best way to explain it is just alignment. It's just alignment of bigger energies, let's say cosmic energies, aligning at the moment of your conception and at the moment of your birth to create your physical being, to create your physiological being as a body, but also to create your personality and your spirit, let's say, right? And then through that alignment, we will find a reflection of who we are. And a lot of times, like you say, we already have the knowing of it. A lot of times those readings, they come in so easily because a lot of times I talk to people about things that they know they are. They really, I would say 99%, they really relate to what they're hearing, but still they have difficulty going into that direction of nourishing that seed, right? Of like, they know the seed is there, but then you need to start taking some actions to actually um, nourish the seed, water the seed, giving it a little bit of fertilizer, sitting with the seed and be like, you know what, you're good. You're a good seed. I know I planted you. Keep on growing. I'm with you here, right? A lot of times we just go and look at other people's seeds, or we go and buy flowers or buy other people's products, and we don't want to deal with our own seed. And you know what, regardless of which system or which teaching, like you said, because for manifesting generator, it's so easy to just go different ways with philosophies and teachings and all that, regardless which system you follow or which tool you have in your life. If that tool really helps you to bring together these two, it helps you to nourish your heart, but also through your heartfelt connection, it empowers your brain, because our brain can be such a disempowering friend. It's actually our servant, but a lot of times we treat it as our master. And when our brain is our master, our life is a little bit not so great, and I know that because as a Virgo, speaking to Sagittarius, as a Virgo, I can easily make my mind a master, but it needs to be a servant first, and then our heart as a master. So whatever system it is for you, whatever philosophy that is for you, if you can see this practical application to your lives that betters quality of your life, that betters, refines quality of your liveness, then follow it without any doubt and see what's going to happen to you.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much. As I'm trying to look at our stream and see if anybody had any questions, I just see that people are really relating to a lot of things that we are sharing. So that is beautiful. So that at least feels like we are not just talking. I just see that people are really about things that are unknown to people. And I'm sure we might have more questions later after the stream. Actually, before we go, I'm going to take it back to you one more time. Tell me about creative offerings that you have this time. I know you mentioned your book, and I do believe that you have your classes coming up in your area. Maybe you're also going to do them online, how people can get more Kelani, more of Alofa with you.
Thank you so much for asking that. When the pandemic hit, I pivoted my services online. So basically, I offer Kelani flow classes, and which is primarily the movement one. And then I have Kelani guided meditation. So I do those classes 4 days a week, and you can do it live with me on Zoom, or you can watch the replays. So you can go to kelaniworld.com to get more information. So Kelani. By the way, Kelani means of the heavens. And then you can just email me at Ioana@kelaniworld.com. I'm going to emerge back into the in-person world. Dun, dun, dun. And tomorrow I have what I'm calling a beta test workshop, because in 2023, I plan on offering a Kelani spread alofa, speaking of alofa, workshop series. So tomorrow is going to be my beta test, where everyone locally in my area is going to be able to try it out. And so stay tuned for that. I hope to hit different parts of where I am locally, maybe the world. I have done Kelani in New Zealand, I've done Kelani in the States, and I've done Kelani in Canada. So hopefully I'll continue that flow. So thank you so much for asking about that, Yuri.
Thank you so much for being here. I think maybe I mentioned to you this, the transit of this week cannot be even more aligned with how manifesting generator you and I are. It's a transit 34, and it's literally about that sacral power, speaking about aliveness, speaking about empowerment. Is just the most aligned way to open up the series in this specific way. And I deeply grateful for your time, for Alofa, for all of the mana that you came to share with us. And I'm looking forward to some more streams later on.
And I thank you so much for providing this platform for me to spread my mission, which is spread Alofa, and for everybody else as well. I'm super grateful for this, and I'm super grateful for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and listening to us. We'll speak to you soon. Lots of alafa, lots of aliveness, lots of mana. Ciao.